thank you all very much, everybody, and we'll kick things off in a minute. Yeah. Ready to go. Right, good morning everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on how best to use new technology to improve housing management. I'm Martin Hilditch, the editor of Inside Housing Magazine, and the webinar, in association with Amido, wants to look at how tech can drive better services for tenants and residents. I'll be introducing the fantastic panelists we've got lined up for you in a moment, but I'll start first with a bit of background to set the scene for today. The discussion will look to focus on ideas and practical tips for how tech can be used to improve operational issues for housing management teams and, most importantly, the experience of residents interacting with their landlord. This is one of the most fundamentally important things for landlords to get right, and the government has indicated that the way landlords interact with their tenants is going to receive ongoing focus moving forward. So there are both practical and moral reasons to get this right. Today's discussion will be a wide-ranging chat about the role that tech and innovation can play and top tips for how to get it right. We'll be talking about innovations that might make it easier to improve residents' experience of interaction with landlords outside of office hours, how single platform solutions can aid efficiency and help staff perform more effectively. Then there are other issues such as use of cloud tech for things such as CCTV systems and the way in which AI could potentially have a positive impact on the management of supported living homes and, again, most importantly, the lives of people who live in those homes. We want this to be a practically focused session, so if you're tuning in today, the aim is that you will leave with ideas that you can take forward in your own organisations. So a learning tool for those embarking on or already in some way into their transformation journeys. There's lots to talk about, so I'll crack right on with introducing our panellists today. First up, we'll be hearing from David Dunn, Chief Executive of RHP Group, well known for driving innovation in the housing sector. Then we'll be hearing from Andy Belton, Chief Operating Officer at Notting Hill Genesis, which was formed from a merger of Notting Hill and Genesis housing associations back in 2018. So it's been through a huge period of transformation in its own right. Next up will be Lucy Fraser, Head of Innovation with Alban Housing Society, who'll be talking about housing and artificial intelligence. And last but not least, we'll be speaking to Simon Evans, CTO with Amido, about ideas about how to get started with digital transformation. And this is an opportunity to hear from the audience as well. So please send in your questions for our panellists, which they can type answers to as we go along. And I'll be picking up on as many of those questions as possible in the question and answer session that will follow the presentations. So we'll be going about 10 minutes each, and that should leave around about 20 minutes to half an hour for questions. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to David Dunn. David, it's over to you.
Thank you, Martin, and hello, everybody. Delighted to be taking part in this webinar talking about such an exciting topic because I think the potential for using technology to radically improve both the homes and services we provide is just mind-blowing. At RHP, we're focusing our innovation in this area upon two things. The first is delivering a great customer service, but in recent years, really shifting this towards providing an exceptional service online for our customers. And secondly, inventing the homes of the future, which are packed full of technology, making them a joy to live in for our customers and super efficient for us to manage and to maintain. We started down this path about 10 years ago now, when we first provided our customers with a really basic facility for paying rents online. And we've come a long way since then, with all of our transactional services now available in this way. And what we've learned is that new technology is giving us the ability to solve problems in a way that we've never had before. And every day we're seeing more and more possibilities for doing this. So the focus of our strategy at RHP is upon 5 things. Firstly, providing customers with easy and convenient access to all transactional services, such as paying rent or ordering repair online. Secondly, offering customers choice about how they contact us over a range of different channels. Making it super easy for both customers and employees to use our systems. Using real-time analytics to find out what customers like and don't like about our services. And finally, making full use of smart technology and connected devices to develop the homes of the future. Through this strategy, what we're aiming to provide customers with is a fabulous experience of using our service and of living in our homes, so that they only ever have to give us information once. We have a consistent style and tone of voice across all of our channels, which people recognize as RHP, so that we value our customers' time and build systems that really eliminate valueless contact and inefficiency. And we know what we need to improve by using a stream of real-time, in-the-moment feedback to inform a constant program improvements and enhancements. All of this, we hope, will build real trust and confidence with customers in our service. So I think one of the interesting things we've learned over the years from our experience of delivering services through digital channels so far is that we think housing is ideal for this type of approach. And the reason I say that is because we've looked at everything that we do over the course of the whole year, and we found that over 90% of the contact we have with customers is transactional in nature. So it can be moved online, delivered through self-service systems, not requiring human input. And we think this is really exciting as it fundamentally changes our service delivery models. It means that customers can have quicker and easier access to the day-to-day things they need. And it also frees up our time to work on more complex matters. And what we've seen is that if you design really good systems, then people are really happy to self-serve and actually want to do so. The problems occur when systems aren't up to scratch, because that's when people won't use them and revert back to the phone. The impact we've seen upon our results has been really positive, because by moving services online and offering self-service, we've achieved higher levels of satisfaction than for the old traditional approach, and we've successfully reduced our operating costs to some of the lowest in our region. And what's really exciting is we think we've just started with all this and just scratched the surface of what's possible, because the more we learn about new technology, the more opportunities we see for its use in housing. It's already clear that in the future, people are going to interact with us through voice-enabled devices rather than keyboards. We're working with a range of companies who are developing entirely automated systems using AI and virtual assistants. And the growth of the Internet of Things is just extraordinary. By the end of the year, people estimate there'll be around 3.6 billion devices that are actively connected to the internet and used for daily tasks. And the homes of the future, which we're going to build, are going to be packed full of these devices. So we're busy experimenting with what's possible right now. So just to end my presentation, here's a quick snapshot of our vision at RHP for using technology to deliver amazing housing services and wonderful homes. Thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, David. I will now hand over to Andy Belton for the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. I'm Andy Belton. As Martin said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Notting Hill Genesis, which was formed through a merger last year. We're one of the biggest housing associations in the UK, with 64,000 homes, mostly in London. And our main purpose is to work in and around those communities and provide affordable homes for lower income households. We began a journey really, we're both Notting Hill and Genesis are 50-year-old companies, so we've got lots and lots of IT that's been built up over the years. Before the merger in 2017 at Notting Hill, we began a journey working with Amido to look at how we could truly begin to offer some digital services that offered end-to-end transaction processing, both for staff who are working out in the field, but ultimately to allow our customers to self-serve as well. And the advice that we got sort of broke down then into 3 phases of implementation. And the first thing that we did with the advice of Amido was to look at automating some of the back-end business processes. So, you know, what happens when you trigger a repair, or what happens if somebody wants to look at their rent account online. And what happens is that if you really want to do that, then you have to automate quite a lot of things through your back office systems, and ultimately, in the case of repairs, you also have to automate the links with third-party contractors. So we did a lot of work on that in 2017, and also created a new front end both for staff, a web-based front end both for staff and customers, and we started to roll that out in 2017 for staff, and give them some genuine digital services that they could use when they were out and about. And we've been very cautious about releasing it to residents because we wanted to make sure it worked properly, but we're in that second stage now. So we have got digital services that are up and running to report repairs, to look at rent accounts, to make payments, and we're gradually rolling out a whole raft of things that we call cases, which are all the other sort of things that happen in terms of transactions between our residents and us. And then we see the third stage really as you know, some of the things that David was talking about. The technology seems to change every week almost, and there's lots and lots of stuff that we've already put in our homes that we're not really taking advantage of in terms of analyzing data, but we're going to sort of move into that area, and also the idea that we can create digital workers or you know, AI tools that can deal with a lot of the simple transactions that we deal with. So that's the area of focus over the next couple of years, I would say. And then obviously from 2018, all of that was slightly complicated by the fact that we've been doing a merger integration project, and obviously managing business as usual as well. But we're making good progress. This slide just is a sort of layman's illustration to the technology that Amido developed with us. So we've built a cloud-based platform that, as I said, provides a customer dashboard and an employee dashboard, and then it contains a number of microservices that are connected to some of our legacy systems, so things like Northgate, things like Microsoft Dynamics, and then we've also connected the platform to some of our key partners. So Waits is one of our main repairs contractors, and when we process a repair that goes to Waits, that becomes a completely end-to-end self-service process. We also in 2017 began working with a company called Plentific, who have an independent platform which provides repairs through accessing a marketplace of small to medium companies who do works. Originally, it was a platform for homeowners to get works done in their home, and we've worked with Plentific to adapt it for the housing sector. And we've run that again as a trial throughout 2017, and then we've rolled it out to different parts of our portfolio. So lots of our staff are now using Plentific to access the sort of lower levels of the repair supply chain. It's working very well. In terms of what it looks like, this is what we call it WorkWise. It looks like this if you are a resident or customer, so you can use it on your mobile phone or on an iPad or a laptop. It's just a website. We deliberately didn't develop native apps, so it is just web-based technology, and customers can process repairs or make payments or manage their direct debits. They've got contact details for a named housing officer in the organisation. They can update their own details, and then they can look at their rent and service charge account in details if they want to do that. And all of this is supporting our so our vision for our resident services model is depicted in this triangle. So we've got the higher volume, more automated transactions going through the digital platform. So repairs and payments are the highest volume. We have a central support team in the middle where people can phone or web chat or get support to use the digital platform. And then everyone also will continue to have a named officer who is actually responsible to make sure that Notting Hill Genesis works in terms of their relationship with us. But because we've shifted a lot of the high volume stuff, they would be dealing with the more complex transactions that need a human intervention. And the position we're at is, so as I said, we introduced the platform for staff last year in 2017, and we've processed about 50,000 transactions through it. And we finally launched it to a group of 6,000 residents about 2 months ago, and 3,000 have signed up at this stage, and they're self-serving. So as I said, quite a cautious approach, but we are beginning to see it making a real difference now. And that's all I was going to say, so thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Andy. Yeah, lots to pick up on from that presentation, and we'll do that in a moment with the questions and answers. Speaking of which, as we move forward, if you're listening in and you've got questions and answers, please do send them in. So that the panelists can pick up on them as we move through, and certainly I can pick up on them in the question and answer session that follows these presentations. Anyway, without further ado, I will hand over to Lucy Fraser, the Head of Innovation with Alban Housing Society. So, Lucy, it's over to you.
Hi, I'm from Alban Housing, Head of Innovation, and we're a housing association based at the very top of Scotland. We have about 4,500 properties, but we cover an area about the size of Belgium. So I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle, in that we had a tenant who died in one of our houses in a small community in a semi-detached house, who then lay unfound for over a year. We ended up on Radio 4 because of it, and the housing regulator got involved. We were discussed in the Scottish Parliament, and basically after being investigated, we got found to be completely innocent of any wrongdoing. However, the Housing Association decided that they should be looking at doing more to support people in their houses. Now, at the time, we thought that we were going to go and buy something off the shelf, but it turned out that what we needed didn't actually exist. So we came at this from a very tenant-focused starting point, and we spoke to our tenants and we interviewed them, and we did a couple of pieces of research with the local university and established that what tenants wanted was to feel safe in their homes, but they didn't want to have the stigma of having an alarm system that they had to wear either around their neck or on their wrists. And it became obvious as we were on that even if people were vulnerable in their homes and they did have the necklaces and the wristbands, that they very often wouldn't wear them, or if they did wear them, they wouldn't actually press it when it happened, when an incident happened. So we knew that we had to develop something that was there to support the tenant in their houses, but they didn't actually have to do anything, it just happened. So we were focusing on ambient systems before ambient systems were popular. And what we ended up doing was creating a system within our houses, a system of sensors, and the data from those sensors was gathered in a hub, and that hub transferred the data to a cloud that is also used by the NHS in Scotland. one of the things that happened up here is we had a health and social care integration that happened about 4 or 5 years ago. So we're well down the line on that, and we knew that we had to work with support services and with the NHS to enable our tenants to be safe in their homes. So we started collecting this data, and what we wanted to do was to enable our tenants to be the owners of that data, that they could say who saw the data, where the data went, and they themselves owned it. So we created a system where they could log on to their own website, access their data, but also enable their family to access the data or carers to access the data. And we're just developing a system where GPs can also access the data. And that's to provide a cover so that different people in different circumstances can choose how they are supported in their own homes, and that we can get support in before we have to go down the formal route with the health and care provision. What we were finding was that people were not getting the support until they had had an incident, and by which time they were scared, and we wanted support to be for them before they reached that point. So at that stage, we realised that we would have to do a bit more work, and this is where the AI and machine learning came in. And to give you a background about myself, I have no technical knowledge at all. What I ended up doing was to be the conduit between the technical people and the tenants. So the first bit of work we started looking at was around falls prevention, and we did that basically because falls was the big issue for the NHS and what cost the most in the NHS system, and also was the one item that took people out of their homes into hospitals and also prevented them coming back sooner. So we started working with the universities and identifying university departments who were ahead of the game in AI and machine learning. And we are in collaboration with Robert Gordon's in Aberdeen, and they have developed a falls prediction tool. So this isn't about picking up when somebody fell, although the system actually does that anyway. This is about identifying who is likely to fall before they fall, based on indicators that the NHS have developed from something called the life curve that was developed through the NHS and Newcastle University. That has already been established. The next prediction that we're looking at is heart and stroke, and we're working with the British Heart Foundation, and again with Robert Gordon's University and also Edinburgh University, to look at, can we start predicting who is likely to have a heart attack or a stroke before they do, and working with the local GP to intervene. So one of the reasons that we ended up doing this was because the proprietary systems that are currently on the market were too expensive for either ourselves or our tenants to afford. And by developing it ourselves and using the research opportunities that we access through the universities, we were actually able to develop systems far cheaper than the current systems like the Apple systems or the Nest systems that are on the market. And one of the things that I want to point out here is that although we are detecting people's health outcomes, we're actually not doing that through actual physiological monitoring. This is about changes in behaviour in the house. So it's about how well you're sleeping. It's about how active you are in the house. So it's all coming from a social perspective. However, the journey that we're going on is that we are now going to be able to link the social data that we're gathering in the homes with the NHS's physiological data through the supercomputer at Edinburgh University, and where we will end up is where the house is likely to be able to predict that you are unwell from the social data, and the NHS will just verify that from the other side. So we've created a Vimeo to try and give a better impression of what we're doing within the house. So I'm just going to play that now, and that'll be me finished. Or I'm going to try and play the video. And that's me finished.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Lucy, for an absolutely fascinating presentation. And again, certainly lots of questions I've got that we'll be asking when we move forward to the question and answer session. I've got some questions coming through, and again, if you're listening in, do ask them, and I'll pick them up in the question and answer that will follow Simon's presentation in just a moment. Speaking of which, I would like to hand over to Simon Evans, CTO with Amido, for his presentation now. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name's Simon, as Martin was just saying, and I'm the CTO of Amido. We are a cloud native technology consultancy based in London. We basically do large scale digital transformations from design through to delivery, largely focused in the cloud for our customers. And we have a couple of substantial clients in the housing sector, one of whom is obviously on this webinar. And so I was asked to do this, and I was trying to work out what to focus on, because obviously today a lot of the focus has been around what kinds of technology people can use in the housing sector to really kind of transform the experience for customers. And then I thought, what's the biggest question that I am always asked by clients, no matter what sector they're from, housing or otherwise? And I decided that actually the biggest question I get asked is how to actually really kind of do a transformation. How do I get started with it? How do I ensure that I'm successful with it? So I'm going to just run very, very quickly through some points that I've learned over the years of things that you need to do in order to be successful on this journey that you will all be on. So the first thing is you really do need to start with why. It sounds obvious, but basically understanding the objectives and the business case of what you're trying to achieve in your transformation is absolutely critical. And most transformations tend to be about one of two things. They're either about, in any business, they're either about trying to promote a certain level of growth in the business through the use of technology, or they're around trying to improve efficiency. And sometimes it can be both, but normally it's focused on one of the two. And in housing, it tends to be more focused around efficiency. So in other words, basically reducing operating costs and providing a more efficient service. But it's very important that you're clear about what the actual real objectives of your transformation are going to be. And then once you know what they are, it's equally important that everybody is aligned in the organization, and that starts at board level. It's absolutely critical that the exec board in your organization is absolutely behind the purpose of the digital transformation, and everybody else understands it. And it's really important that is over communicated throughout your digital transformation program. But also, it's also important to know that the customer is not always right. So there's a lot of talk, and this is absolutely vital, that everything we do is very much customer focused. But being customer focused doesn't necessarily mean the customer knows what they need. What they need and what they want and how much technology can help them isn't necessarily something you can take verbatim from your customers. But I would say that whatever the purpose of the transformation, if you're focusing on customer convenience, then you're not normally going far wrong. And certainly a lot of the conversation today has been around self-service, which is really there. Yes, it does reduce costs and improve efficiencies for housing associations, but actually it's really about providing a better quality of service that could be done without the technology. The next thing that's really important to understand right early on is who will hold the baby. In other words, when you've delivered this thing, and these things are complicated technology-wise, when you've delivered your transformation, how are you going to own, run, support, feed and water what you've delivered? Yes, you deliver a transformation normally through some kind of project stage of software development and software delivery. But at the end of it, you end up with a product, and that product needs to be nurtured and needs to be maintained and kept going. And this is kind of one of the most fundamental questions that we ask customers these days in terms of what is your ongoing support model? Do you want to run it internally? Do you plan to outsource it all? Or is there some other model that you're interested in? So understanding that up front is absolutely critical and just as important as understanding what it is you're going to achieve. And then the next thing is that you really do need to generate momentum. Digital transformations can live or die by not really delivering much at any point. So it's vital that you have a fairly long-term plan with a general direction. It is equally vital that you actually deliver that plan iteratively over a course of several milestones where you're actually giving your customers value in small chunks. And the next thing is you then need to start thinking about how you're going to really deliver this, what technology you're going to use. Now, the first thing here is you really do need to divide and conquer. So you need to pick a partner or partners that can really help you, because this is a complicated thing. And you need to pick ISV technologies from vendors and products that really are fit for purpose. But that gets me on to my next point is when you're dealing with product vendors, you really do need to know their limits. So what do I mean by that? Because what I mean is it's all too often that a product company will come in and say that the answer is their product. What is the question? It's all too often that a product company will say that you can do everything in their system. But every system, no matter what you buy or build, has limits, and you need to understand those limits so that you can make sensible decisions. And when you're making those decisions, you really do then need to understand the trade-offs that you're making. Yeah, all good design decisions in any digital transformation are all about trade-offs. And you really need to understand and have the right people in the room to understand what you're really trading off. Much of what you're trading off isn't visible. So it's not about what you can see, it's about what you can't see. So, too often I have conversations with clients where the clients aren't necessarily aware of what they're trading off, and if you start talking to them about some of those things, then it paints a very different picture of the direction they're taking. Now, you're going to come up with a big picture up front in a digital transformation as to what it is you're trying to achieve, and you're going to come up with a big design, which you absolutely need an upfront design. But once you've got that upfront design, you need to be prepared to inspect and adapt, which is a kind of lean software development principle. But this principle is kind of saying that, emergent design happens and emergent thinking happens and change happens in businesses. So you need to be prepared to adapt your plans to move in the direction the business wants to move. And a typical example of that is something like an acquisition that, for example, that happened in Notting Hill with Genesis, where you've got a merger of two organizations that, wasn't something that was on the big plan at the start, but became something important during the delivery. Next thing to know about all of these programs is that the problem is virtually never the technology. The problem is nearly always the people. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that it's very difficult for us as humans to talk and have decent communications when the team size gets bigger. So as you start to scale out your digital transformation, you need to be aware of the impact and the risk that you're putting your own transformation under by running too fast. So you really need to trade off, like, how quickly do I need something delivered versus what risk is it putting it under by actually scaling out the delivery. And there are absolutely limits to how far you can scale this before it turns into a very difficult thing to manage. The next thing I talk about is legacy. Be aware of any digital transformation that tries to eliminate legacy. Legacy never dies. The people have been trying to eliminate mainframes now for the last 20 or 30 years. They still exist. And in truth, trying to eliminate a legacy, you're going to have to replace it with something like for like functionally. So replacement is largely not really the game that you need to be in. What you need to be in is a place where you're managing your legacy appropriately, so that you're not increasing the problems in that legacy, that you're isolating the consumption of it, and that its purpose, and that you're managing and maintaining it properly. And then the last point I wanted to talk about, which I think is really important, is hearts and minds. It's all well and good landing software and landing technology, but what matters most in this is hearts and minds, both of your employees and of your customers. And I think Andy mentioned earlier at Notting Hill that one of the things that's happened there is a very slow rollout to the tenants for self-service, but that's because you only get one shot at this to get it right, and you need to know that your customers are happy with that service before you roll it out to a large proportion of people. And you need to actually educate people in this process, particularly your employees will be changing the ways they work. You really do need to kind of actually have a people change process, not just a technology change process in place, so that you win people over and they understand the value of what is being delivered. And so that was it for me. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Simon. Lots of food for thought there, and we will pick up on that in a few moments' time. We've got questions coming in. Please do use the Q&A box to ask more questions, and I'll pick up as many of them as I can moving forwards. And I might just start with one from Chris Pegg, really nice question that is asked about and picks up on some of the points that Simon was just making there. How can we embrace smart buildings when we don't understand dumb ones? With the ever-growing list of Internet of Things building systems, how will the sector cope in transforming from asset managers and housing managers to data analyzers? So I might start with David, and then I'll probably move to Lucy, who was talking about her own journey in those presentations, and then Simon, because it obviously picks up on some of the points you were making towards the end there, Simon. So yes, I will move to David first, if that's okay. So what are your thoughts there, David?
Yeah. Hi, Martin. It was a great question, isn't it? And
yes, it's fantastic. It gets right to the heart of it. Yeah.
What I can tell you is what we're doing at RHP, which is basically to experiment and to try things out. And I don't know about fixing dumb buildings, but what we're trying to do is to experiment in a smart way. To be first of all be very clear about what problems we're trying to fix, because I think the danger with innovation and digital technology is you can sort of blindly go down certain tracks and not be clear about what for. So we're very clear about the things we're trying to sort out, and secondly, to put into place proper systems for measuring the impact of that technology. And in some ways, that's the most challenging bit. So how do you know that it's actually making a real difference to either your customers' lives or to the efficiency of your business? And how can you really measure that? So I think in answer to Chris's question, all I'd say is that we need to be brave and bold and not get stuck in the past. Try things out, experiment, but experiment in sort of proper, thought out ways.
And do you find that I mean, Chris was obviously talking about asset managers and the housing managers, frontline staff. Do you find that people are uncomfortable, that it does take time to get there? How do you make sure you're kind of involving people, making sure that they're comfortable through that process and that they're kind of going with you?
I think as the previous presenter was just talking about, you've got to link technology and innovation and digitalization to human beings and sort of people change process. And I think one of the real benefits we've got here at RHP is that we're relatively small. So there's 220 people working here, and we've got that mindset, which is really about giving things a go, trying things out. Really appreciating that type of approach, as opposed to, I suppose, a sort of less sort of progressive approach to sort of staying with the past and things like that, really. So for me, it's really about, making sure you start with the people and you work with those people and you help them to understand, what it is you want to change and why you want to change things, but also putting in place all sorts of processes to encourage people to behave in that way. So I recognise the sentiment behind the question, but I think it's probably a bit easier in small to medium-sized organisations, which are very agile.
Yeah, good point. And I might bring Andy in a minute to talk about his organisation as well. But I'll move to Lucy next. Thanks very much, David. And the same question. So Lucy, you were talking about the journey you've been on as well, and that you didn't necessarily come from a technical background, but nonetheless, embracing quite a forward-thinking and really exciting set of changes in your own organisation. So yes, to pick up on Chris's question again, how do you move from one place to the other?
I would reiterate what was just said about it being a person-centred approach and being agile. I mean, one of the things about the Scottish system is that legislatively we had to work with our tenants for over 10 years now, so we're not allowed to do anything that materially affects our tenants, be it anything to do with the rent or the building, without consulting with them first. So our history is ask the tenants what they want and then try and deliver that as much as possible. I mean, what we found was that in the journey that we went on, we realised various management practices that were not helpful to our tenants. One of the big outcomes that we had after our first development was seeing how many disabled people that we had not been working with to the best of our ability. So we started off on this journey thinking that we were going to support older people in the houses. The youngest person that we have in our first development is 18 years old, and the eldest is 93. In the work that we've done, it wasn't just about the fabric of the house, it was about how well they were, and we had quite a lot of research done on the back of it. and there were improvements in things like loneliness, on people with long-term conditions, about how their health improved just by being in a house where they felt they were supported, and then they could start doing things that they couldn't do before, and take up employment that they couldn't do before. So it's not just about improving the house, it's improving the whole wellness of the individual in the house, which in turn then impacts on the amount of management you have to do as an organisation. So when you start with the person and you work through from that end, you get outcomes that you hadn't even anticipated achieving at the end of it.
Thank you very much, Lucy, and a few issues there that we'll pick up on in a few minutes' time. Actually, before I come to you, Simon, I might go to Andy next, just to pick up on those points that David were making. So David was saying effectively that his organisation is quite able to be agile because of its size. Obviously, you work for an organisation that's got quite a large scale. So does that make things more difficult? And just your thoughts on Chris's question, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. So I think on the agile question, so again, we've completely changed the way we develop things and roll them out over the last 2 or 3 years, and we would always involve lots of staff and residents in terms of designing what a solution is going to look like, and again, giving Simon some credit. So he, in 2017, when we were talking about what it is, why are we doing this and what are we trying to do, he said at one stage, the thing that you're trying to do is create a frictionless user experience. So if you develop something that people can use easily, then they'll use it. And if it does what it's supposed to do, they'll use it. And if it gets them what they want, they'll use it. And if it doesn't do those things, then they won't use it. And it's just the age we live in. We all wander around doing stuff on our mobile phones because it works and it gets us what we want, and it's easy. So we are a large organisation, but we always trial things with parts of the organisation and make sure it works before we try and roll it out to a wider audience. And then on the IoT question, I mean, we're really at the early stages, but it does look like, I think lots of the equipment and capabilities that we're putting into new buildings could really help us to manage things much better and much more proactively. And so I think now that we've got this, it feels like now that we've built something in Azure at the center of the organization, we can start to tap into some of these things that are out there in the so-called edge much more effectively. So I think, I haven't got any specific projects at the moment, but I think we will have over the next year or so.
Thanks very much, and I'll be coming back to you in a moment's time, because I think there was a specific question for you as well, Andy. Simon, just to round off on this, again, you touched on it in your presentation towards the end as well, but this how will the sector cope and transform from asset managers and house managers to data analysts, I guess. But also from what you've seen, is that something that the sector is typically good at, or does it need some sort of improvement in its thinking about how it does work through that process?
Well, I think the problem that's discussed here isn't unique to the housing sector. I think the problem is one that's kind of fairly sort of widespread, which is with all this technology that's available, particularly in the IoT space. How do we actually embrace it, make sense of it, and actually use it? And I think there's several things to this. So the first thing is that it's with IoT and the likes, you need to look firstly at having the right foundations for a digital platform that will enable you to actually consume and use the data on the edge. So that needs to exist. And that is, so IoT as a thing needs to be part of a broader digital transformation program without doubt. But then it kind of also goes back to the point I was trying to say in my presentation, which is you also need to think heavily about how you divide and conquer. So, the answer to the how do you solve the complexity of the IoT technology question isn't to become IoT specialists yourselves. It's to partner with the right organizations and the right providers to make that happen. So there's this is true of any digital transformation, that the success comes through having an ecosystem of cloud providers that are simplifying and making it easier to consume data from IoT, all the way through to technology partners like ourselves that will actually turn that into a software solution for you. And ultimately you need to kind of not outsource necessarily just the human piece of it, but the actual delivery of it. But you need to kind of outsource some of the technology to a point where it's you're consuming services that are commoditized. And what's interesting in the AI and the IoT space now is that there are a number of commoditized services out there for IoT and AI that exactly solve this complexity problem. And it's so important on the transformation that you don't get embroiled in complexity, because it normally is the thing that kills the ambition you started with.
Really important point there, I think. Yes, thanks very much, Simon. Andy, I'll kind of switch now, because I want to get through as many questions as possible that people have asked who've been tuning in. There's a couple for you. The second of which I will then probably move to David with. So as well. So the first question is, Andy, do residents choose to contact their named local officer in preference to the contact centre or digital services? And how do you control this access? So I'll just very quickly ask you that one. That's from Karen Rogers. And then I'll move on to a second question that's directed to you as well.
Okay, thanks, Martin. So as I described, we've got that sort of multi-channel model. We are trying to move the high volume, simple transactions onto digital. But if people would prefer to still phone us or to contact their housing officer, we're not really discouraging that. So what we've seen over the last few months, so as I said, we launched the Workwise website to a group of 6,000 residents, and about 3,000 are now actively using it. There was a big, in the first 2 or 3 days, about 1,200 people signed up, and then they've been signing up at about on an average of about 75 a day. And we haven't really promoted it.
And did that fit with your expectations? Was that roughly what you were anticipating would be the kind of take up, if you like?
Yeah, well, I'm quite pleased with the way that initial launch has gone. And as I say, we haven't promoted it any further than actually initially launching it at this stage. And we're just seeing, again, being quite cautious, just seeing how it's working for those residents. Some of the issues that we've seen. So in order to sign up, you have to have a couple of pieces of information to identify yourself to our systems. And some of the problems that people have had is that either they don't have that information, or that the information that we've got that corresponds to their version of that information is different. So some of it, we've seen a number of people who have tried to sign up and have had to be helped. And then we've seen, as I say, roughly 3,000 people who've just found it quite easy to sign up, and they are processing a number of transactions. So yeah, we're quite pleased with that at this stage. Yeah. So
fabulous. And next question for you from Daniel Killian, but I think this one I'll move out with as well. So David, I'll come to you next on it. It says, Andy, have you predicted what percentage of your staffing budget could be saved in the future as a result of more digital services? So yeah, quite a focused question there. Yes, what have you kind of predicted in terms of savings?
The original business case before the merger for Workwise was, because we have that housing management service was purely based on housing officers managing patches and doing all of the transactions with residents. And we expected to save about 25% of the costs of that service, and we've brought that forward into the merger environment, and it's not. It's become it's become a slightly different model because we've built in the contact center in the middle, but over a period of from the start of the merger to year 3 of the merger, we would expect something around savings in staff operating costs of that range, about 20 to 25%.
Fabulous. Thanks very much for that insight. And David, I will move to you with the same question now. So, have you predicted percentage of staffing budget that could be saved in the future? Is that the type of thing you're looking at too, as a result of more digital services? So, yeah, just wanted to get a bit of a take from you on that as well.
Yeah, and we look at it more from the point of view of our overall operating costs for the organisation. So although we do break it down and analyse it according to different types of expenditure, over the last 3 years, as a result of digital transformation, we reduced our operating costs by about 15% in real terms. And we're down to about £2,800 per unit on operating costs. Over the next 3 years, we're targeting to get down to £2,500 per unit. And that's as a result of moving transactional businesses online. I think the point about how much you're saving on staffing budgets is an interesting question, because we don't quite see it like that, because for us it's more about making better use of the people we've actually got. So as I mentioned earlier on, RHP is a relatively small organisation in terms of the number of people we employ. And what we're finding is that we still need to employ quite a lot of people. It's just that they do different things now. And in many cases, I think they're doing probably more interesting work than they were in the past. So we're certainly sort of seeing a change in the type of skills we need in the organisation. And that's really probably the big change that we're seeing and expect to see over the next few years.
Fabulous. Thanks very much. And yeah, so I guess that some interesting and quite attractive figures there as well. But I think comes back to that point that Simon was making earlier about being clear about objectives as well, from both Andy and David there. Lucy, I'm going to come to you just for a second, and I'm going to round things off by return to Simon with another question that people have asked. But I just wanted very quickly to ask, I mean, you talked about the work with the British Heart Foundation you're doing, and some of the work to kind of predict like the stroke, heart attack. So yeah, just let us know where you're at with that and what the timescales are.
Can I talk about costs for a second? Following up on the last question, we did a piece of research, a social return on investment, looking at how much money was saved working in partnership when health and social care worked in partnership with housing, putting the housing at the centre of it. And the outcome was, for every pound that we spent on the technology, £7 were saved from an NHS and care perspective. So going forward and looking at the crisis in NHS and care provision, I think that's something that is really undervalued about what housing can do within that sector if the collaboration is there and the joint working is there. So that's my first thing. Second thing is the British Heart Foundation and the University in Edinburgh, we're starting working on that. We already have a PhD working within the Housing Association to look at the retrofitting of the tech and how we can start predicting the heart and stroke. So it's started already. It's a 3.5-year project. And included in that is quite a large piece about the ethics of data collection and storage and how we're going forward with it. So we're basically developing a system that doesn't store the data within any of the big tech companies. So it's not with Amazon or anything, it's with the EPCC in Edinburgh. So it's not associated with any of the big names within technology. However, there is what they term a safe space within that system that enables big technology companies to work with us. So we are in conversations with NTT Data and some other big companies looking at how we can use the data to develop better systems for our tenants and create a co-ownership model so that we're not always paying commercial rates for them, that will enable our tenants to access the most cutting edge technology but not having to pay the cutting edge prices for it. So that's where we are at the moment.
Fabulous. And I hope we can say watch this space in Inside Housing on that, because lots of interesting stuff to pick up on there, and it would be good to follow that moving forward. Right, last question, and we'll round things off with you, Simon. So yeah, anything more on that cost issue would be great, but also the best way, this is from Abdullah Iqbal, what is the best way to integrate various software into a core program which teams, tenants, contractors can use? And then we'll round off after that. So if you can keep it relatively brief, we will just run through that question and get some final thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, so I think in terms of how to organise yourselves on a program for delivery, I think the first thing to say is actually that probably the team structure that you'll need at the end of the digital transformation is different to the one that you need during. The end team structure is largely going to be based around the organisational model of your operating model of what departments you've got, and you probably want to align your software delivery teams to those departments as much as possible. During a digital transformation program, however, you probably need a little bit more of a kind of war room type approach where everyone's kind of more in one place, because those teams, if they're distributed teams, they need to talk to each other and they need to be able to communicate. So you need the structure to make that happen. But I think going back to what I was trying to say earlier, I would only scale this as during the transformation as far as you have to. So the average effective team size in software is somewhere between 6 to 9 people. Anything more than that, and it tends to get rather chaotic. And then, so if you've got multiple teams, then you're also looking at having some additional processes to make sure those teams talk to each other. So if you can have it in one team, that's during the kind of the war phase, if you like, of transformation, that's always best. But obviously that limits how much velocity you have in delivery. So as you scale, then you probably want to scale around the kind of really big hitting objectives of your transformation, making sure that teams are really held to account on the objectives that they are there to do.
Thank you very much there, and some really clear thoughts and messaging. Right, so we have sadly run out of time. I would like to thank you all very much for tuning in today, and also thank our panelists David, Andy, Lucy and Simon for taking part in a fascinating series of presentations and discussion at the end. So thank you all very much, and thank you for tuning in. Thanks.